Welcome to the Sisterhood Spotlight. We are a video podcast that highlights and celebrates women who have overcome obstacles and challenges in life. Through it all, they have triumphed in the face of adversity to become successful in their own right. In the Sisterhood Spotlight, I am shining the light on women who have made a difference in their world. Women such as yourself who represent all of us. We are entrepreneurs, community leaders, corporate professionals, speakers, and coaches who inspire, motivate, and encourage others by sharing their stories, their knowledge, and wisdom. Sharing one's insight on their journey to success can be impactful. So, thank you for coming on today's journey with me. I am Doreen Alvarez, and I am your host. I couldn't be happier to shine the Sisterhood spotlight on an honoree from Empowered Magazine, Rita Carter. Please welcome Rita Carter. Hi,
Hi there.
welcome.
How are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
Great.
Before I begin, I want to congratulate you on being featured in Empowered Magazine. How does it feel to be nominated and selected to share your story?
It feels amazing. I feel humbled. I'm honored to be selected.
That's awesome. Can you please share with us what you do? First of all, I'm so excited. I know exactly what you do, but the audience doesn't, and I'm so excited to talk to you.
Great. I am a certified relationship life coach. I'm also a speaker and an author, focusing on uplifting women in their relationships and for them to be the best version of themselves.
Awesome. Before I interviewed you, I went into your Instagram, which is Breakthrough with Rita.
hmm
And I read one of your posts. It's a thought provoking question. It says, what is the most important quality you believe is essential for building a thriving and lasting relationship?
For me, I think that's
Mhm.
communication. I don't care what level of the relationship you're on, rather if you're in the beginning, you're just courting and dating, if it's, you're my fiance, you're preparing to be married, or you're at 25 years of marriage. I think communication is key to really understand where the two of you meet. If there are any issues or concerns, you can talk about them clearly so that way you can understand one another and support one another through each season that you go through together. So communication is key.
Communication is key. And oftentimes people get caught up in pointing the finger at the other person's action without taking responsibility or accountability for their own lack of ability to communicate. Because I believe
Absolutely.
every reaction is a result of somebody's, of every reaction is I can't even think of the word right now. But there is a reason for everyone else's reaction in a relationship. And you can't just point the finger. You got to ask that person, why do you feel that way? What did I do?
Absolutely. I think it's self-awareness, right? We're all human and we don't want to show that vulnerable side of things, right? And so if we really tap into the vulnerability, we can really say, I feel this way, right? It doesn't mean that you're a bad person or you purposely made me feel some kind of way, but it's the communication to make sure that you can communicate why I feel this way. And we're not perfect, but we need to be self aware of where we are and what we bring to the table so that way we can work on those areas of opportunities because we all have them.
Oftentimes, when we communicate how we feel, sometimes the other person gets defensive.
Mhm,
So I'm glad that you said that. This is how I feel. I'm only telling you how I feel. I'm not saying that you're a bad person.
mhm,
This is just how I feel. And you can't argue with my feelings,
mhm.
right?
Absolutely. Your feelings are valid, right? Those are your feelings and they need to be validated. And then it's important for it to be heard and to be received to say, I'm sorry you felt that way. That's not what I meant. That's not what I intended. Let me further explain what I meant, right? So that way that confusion could be cleared up a little bit and the two of you can get back on one accord in regards to how you feel and how to make the change. You have to be able to shift the environment, and that comes with communication.
I like that. Now let's talk about triggers. We talked a little bit off camera or
Mhm,
about triggers, and sometimes it is when a person is in a relationship, a fully committed relationship, we bring in the baggage from previous relationships, and we take along these triggers, and sometimes these triggers can actually destroy a relationship.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times we bring in baggage not believing that we are aware. I know for me to be, quite candid with you, I brought baggage into my marriage early on and I didn't even know. And the baggage didn't really come from another relationship per se. Well, it was a relationship, but it
Mhm.
was the relationship with my father. And so as soon as my husband would start to say certain things, I was triggered. And so one small argument went to times 10 because I was triggered, and I didn't learn early on how to manage those triggers. So a lot of our arguments earlier on had nothing to do with each other. It was from the baggage that we brought into the marriage that we had to deal with.
And for you, when you are triggered, it's like you're reliving
Mhm.
a memory, or you're reliving, a nightmare, basically, or something that hurt you,
Yes. And most cases, the person, myself, I wasn't healed. You
right?
have to do the work to be healed from that traumatic experience that caused the trigger. Because once you're healed, you're able to now learn how to manage those triggers because the triggers are going to come, right? Because that's an experience. That's your experience. That's your story. So it's not going away. But how do I manage this, right, as I go throughout life? And you can't manage it effectively if you don't heal from it. A lot of times we suppress things, so you can't suppress it and then be healed.
I like how you brought up the example of your own marriage
Mhm,
and how the trigger was that of your father.
mhm,
Um, I think many of us walk around with triggers from all kinds of like childhood
mhm,
triggers. And
mhm,
for me, I have a ton of childhood triggers.
mhm,
And I know that I brought that into my marriage as
mhm,
well. And I know that I bring that into well, I brought that into my future relationships that I had
mhm,
post marriage. But not only did I bring in my childhood triggers, I brought in the triggers that I suffered from my ex-husband, from my
mhm,
marriage into the next relationship.
mhm,
And I do want to bring this up because we talked a little bit off camera. Um, I had mentioned to you that I was in a relationship with a gentleman who was just
mhm,
absolutely wonderful. Just, I had never met anybody like him,
mhm,
anybody. But when it came to the point where he wanted me to move in with him,
mhm,
I just completely froze. And you said to me, it's communication. What did you say to make him believe that you two, or make him believe that you would move in with him? Right?
mhm,
And I said, yeah, you know what? I did say a couple of things, but
mhm,
when it came down to the moment, I was completely triggered. And I said exactly what it was. I was a stay at home mom for 15 years, and
mhm,
I'd gone back to my husband 2 times, and in those 2 times, he's the one who kicked me out of the house and made me
mhm,
leave, and I was so afraid that if I get into another relationship and I move in with that person and things fall apart, I'm gonna have to leave and start from nothing all over again.
mhm, mhm. So when I mentioned the communication is because maybe, just maybe, your actions were not as clear as your verbal communication, right?
Mhm.
If you were spending all day, every day with him, you fall asleep on the phone with him at night, like that old school love, right? You're getting to
Right.
know each other. But yet you verbally say, I'm not ready. That means that your actions, he was going off your actions, but you were verbally saying something different. But what was key was that it triggered you from your abandonment. I would
Mhm.
consider that abandonment from your previous relationship that you had yet to deal with. And so now the idea of moving in with someone triggers you to say no because I need to have the foundation. I need to create stability and I can't go back there. So I strongly feel that there's still some healing that needs to be done in order for you to fully surrender to your next relationship and be fully present. You're not going to be able to be fully present with the person that you were meant to be with in your future until you truly heal from the past relationship. And that was abandonment. And those are your feelings and they're valid, but you have to deal with them and you have to be able to heal from them. It's not fair to your future husband, right?
Right, right. And I think that oftentimes people are afraid to use the word trigger. People are
Hmm.
afraid to people don't recognize why they're behaving in a certain way. Now,
Hmm.
I've been doing a lot of work, which is
Hmm.
why I was able to take a step back and say, "You know what? I'm being triggered."
Hmm.
And when somebody's triggered, it's like I said, they're reliving a nightmare and it's so real, you know?
Hmm.
It becomes like it's paralyzing.
Hmm.
But
That is true. And I'm so glad that you're doing the work so that way you know how to manage the triggers when they come. But again, you don't want to carry that baggage on into your
no.
next relationship, right? You don't want
No.
anything to hinder this forthcoming relationship that's in play.
Absolutely. And I do remember this gentleman saying to me, and I brought this up to you. I said, women we're so independent. And oftentimes when we're put in a situation where we have
Mhm,
to survive, we kind of stay in survival mode.
mhm,
And that has been my case
mhm,
since 2018. And I
mhm,
can't stop. So when somebody wants to help me, I generally shy away and turn down that particular help. And in this case, and I'm just using this as an example because we're talking about relationships,
mhm,
I remember this man said to me, "I just want to feel like I am included in your life."
mhm,
And that made me stop and realize I'm just on automatic, I'm just living and I'm not really taking into account this other person's feelings.
mhm. I actually appreciate this man's vulnerability because he said that he needs to. He's not sure where he fits.
Mhm.
And men, just like women, need to feel needed. You don't hear that verbally from a lot of men, but they need to feel needed, just like we need to feel needed. We need to feel like we have a place in their life. We need to feel like we're a priority. We need to feel like if I was to walk away, you would feel it, right? We need to feel that importance. And for you to say, nope, I'm not ready, like you immediately, shut that down and build that wall up. He's not sure where he fits and he needs to feel needed. And so I think it's only fair that you communicate with him, right? And just because you say, hey, not right now, doesn't mean that it would never be. It just means that I have some work that I'm doing on myself. And I really enjoy the time that we're spending together, but just bear with me.
And that's communication right there. I remember I had such a hard time communicating what was inside
Mhm,
and how I felt, and I know it was because I was so triggered.
mhm,
But I write. I write everything down because that is my therapy.
mhm,
Um, but I do remember saying all I needed was more time.
mhm, mhm. It's interesting that you say that. When my husband and I went through a season years ago, it seemed like every conversation ended up in an argument.
Mm.
And so we started writing to each other.
Oh, I like that.
We started in the same home. We stayed in the same home, slept in the same bed, but I was like, I can't deal with another argument. I need to get my point across. I need to get my feelings out there. I need to feel heard. So I'm just going to write him a letter and he will write me back.
That
And
is
it
so
worked that way for the
romantic.
longest. But I felt heard. And it would be times where he was like, I get it. I get it. I get you now. I get what you mean. And that's not what I meant. But so if you're not sure of the words to say, because sometimes communication could be a little difficult for some,
Mhm.
especially men, right? Men
Oh,
are
yes.
masculine and they're not vulnerable in most cases, at least not in the beginning. They're not vulnerable. So they don't have the words all the time to communicate. And so if you're not sure, write it out. I think that was a good thing for you.
I think that story you just told me about your husband and yourself, it's so beautiful. It's so romantic. And oftentimes when people argue, we cut each other we don't hear that other person. We cut each other off. So
Hmm.
we're not listening. So when
Hmm.
you're writing something down and how you feel, the other person is forced to read it and
Hmm.
listen.
Absolutely.
But some people are terrible writers. They're terrible at writing stuff. So when you read it, you're like, wait, are you being mean?
Yeah.
Are you being a narcissist? And
Mhm.
it just comes across like terrible. And then when you speak with that person, they're like, no, the way you write and the way you speak, it's just different.
Yeah.
You're
Now,
two different
to be
people.
candid, not every letter was a love letter now.
Okay, yes.
'Cause we were going through a tough season in our marriage, but I felt heard, and remember, like, reading back my letter, like, you wanna be respectful, right? You wanna create healthy boundaries in your relationship, so just because we're not on the best of terms and we're bumping heads,
Mhm.
doesn't mean that I have the right to be disrespectful to you. Doesn't mean that I have the right to treat you less than because we're not on the best of terms. So I think there needs to be a certain level of respect in relationships, right? And it's not there all the
There
time.
has to be a level of respect because oftentimes when people are communicating to each other or couples,
Mhm,
even in text messages, they start calling each other names without realizing that
mhm,
they're calling each other names. For
mhm,
example, I'll bring up my ex. He had said to me, "You must be the cruelest woman in the world." And I took that in a very offensive way. And I'm like, I'm not being cruel.
mhm,
Just because I don't wanna be with you or I change my mind doesn't
mhm,
mean I'm cruel. That's another thing we spoke about off camera is that people have the right to choose, just
mhm,
like people have the right to unchoose.
mhm. Absolutely. I think we all evolve, right?
Mhm.
There are seasons in our lives. And one thing that I always share is that there are relationships that are seasonal and there are relationships that are lifelong. And so you have to know which relationship fits where. And so as we continue to evolve, as you start your career and you're taking this journey, the person that started out with you may not necessarily end up with you. Doesn't mean that you're better than that person, doesn't mean that they're a horrible person. It just means that we grew apart. We're not thinking along the same lines. Your journey is different from mine. And so I want to support you and I want you to be happy, but that's not my journey.
That's a good point. That's a good point. The way you also the way you feel towards or about a person at the time,
Mhm,
it can change. And
mhm.
and and it doesn't mean that that other person is doing anything wrong or there's something wrong with the other person. Sometimes you just realize as you move forward with this person that there's something missing.
Absolutely. But I think it's important, and I'm not an advocate for divorce if that's what you choose to do. Like my clients say, I'm done. I support them in that decision. But I
Mhm.
ask one question before. Have you tried everything that you could to save that marriage before you make that decision? Really think about it. Don't just jump off and say, "Yes, I'm done." Really
Yeah.
think about it. Have you done everything that you could? Right? And if you haven't, if you can honestly say, "I haven't done everything that I could," then maybe there's a little bit more work to do before you sign those papers. Maybe it's just communication.
I agree completely. I will say this that I don't think my ex-husband and I am gonna cry, did everything to save that marriage.
Mhm,
Um, but I am at peace with the divorce and what we did.
mhm,
But I tell everyone else that I speak with, I have a lot of women coming forward and talking to me about my journey
mhm,
and how I went from point A to point B. And they start to share their stories about their relationships. I
mhm,
always say the same thing: work it out, even if you think it's over, do everything you possibly can
mhm,
because you don't want to carry the guilt that's
mhm,
associated. There's this guilt that's associated with it. And
mhm,
I realized that the guilt that was associated with my divorce was the fact that I knew I didn't do everything I possibly could to save that marriage.
mhm,
And then going into future other relationships, which was very, very few,
mhm,
I would have my ex-husband in the back of my head. I wasn't ready. But I will say that this year, I mean, it took me 3 years. I finally was able to let go
mhm,
and see my ex-husband without feeling sad or feeling that a little bit of guilt. It's like I actually I wish him happiness
mhm.
and friendship, moving forward.
You know what you did in 3 years? You grieved.
I did, yes.
You grieved your marriage. You grieved what didn't come to pass. You grieve not living up to the expectation. You grieve for not having that healthy marriage that you desired. And it's okay to grieve.
Mhm.
And it's okay to look back and say, you know what? That was a season of my life where I could have done things differently, but I am who I am. And I'm not
Absolutely.
human. I'm human and I'm not perfect. I'm not gonna make mistakes. And I'm gonna take what I learned from that season to make sure that I heal, that I finish the grieving process so I'm whole and ready for the next blessing that's coming my way.
And the key word here is heal.
Mhm,
A lot of people don't realize that they are grieving,
mhm,
and just there's so many emotions and associated with relationships that end, especially if you spent a lifetime and grew up with that person.
mhm,
Like you said, you and your husband were married 17 years, and you two feel like you grew up with each other.
mhm. Yeah, I think it's important to heal before you go into any relationship. And you
Mhm.
have to do it like I had to heal within my marriage, if that makes
Mhm,
sense,
mhm,
right? I didn't leave my marriage to heal. I had to heal within it. And that takes a lot, right? Because sometimes you're faced with what hurt you to begin with.
mhm.
So it's important that you do the work and that you heal so that way that you're ready. A lot of times people use that next man or woman thinking that they're going to fill that void, and that's not the case. You're
No.
actually just suppressing what you're really feeling on the inside.
There will always be, you will always feel like there's something missing,
Mhm,
because and that missing piece is you.
mm,
Your whole heart, your healing.
mhm.
That's what's missing.
So one thing I would ask a client of mine, I would just hold up a mirror and say, "Who do you see? Who are you?" And honestly, a lot of people can't answer that question and be authentic, right? Outside of the husband, outside of the wife, the whatever role you play, the corporate ladder, the mother, the daughter, all of these roles we play, who are you outside of that? And that's where the healing starts.
I love that. I recently spoke at a women's wellness retreat,
Mhm,
and I asked the audience a bunch of questions. And then the last question I said is, you have to be honest. Don't be honest with me, but be
mhm,
honest with yourself, because after all, you have to go home with yourself. You have to live with yourself. When you look in the mirror,
mhm,
whether you work out or not, when you look in the mirror, are you happy with the woman that you see staring back at you?
mhm,
Not a single lady rose their hand.
mhm. Yeah.
And
Now
I,
we can look gorgeous. We get the makeup, we have the
Mhm.
hair, we have the clothes, we don't worked out in the gym, we're feeling good. But how do you look on the inside?
Yeah, yep,
'Cause
external.
that's gonna show eventually. It's gonna shine through at some
It
point. I
is
mean, it's only so much makeup and so much clothes and hair that you can do because the authentic you is gonna show at some point. You can only camouflage for so long.
external transformation follows internal healing. All right, so we are running close to the time we have to get off.
Mhm.
I swear I wish I can talk to you for a whole hour, because everybody has relationship problems and everybody has questions that need to be answered. But
Mhm.
I want to let our audience know how they can get a hold of you. What is your Instagram?
My Instagram is Breakthrough with Rita. My Facebook is also Breakthrough with Rita. Feel free to
Hold on, hold
email
on. Okay,
me.
breakthrough with E. Okay.
Yes.
And
And they can
out.
also email me client care at breakthroughrita.com, ready.com. Um, so check me out. I post content all the time to get people thinking. Reach out to me. I do free discovery calls as well.
That's incredible. I will definitely be sharing many of your posts. I was being a stalker. Um, yeah, I went and I was like, "Oh, this is good. This is good. This is good." And I think I shared something. Before we close, what advice would you give to our viewers to motivate and inspire them?
Do the work. Who are you? Ask yourself that question. And it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to say, you know what? There's some areas I need to work on and I'm going to work on it. Don't put a timetable to it. Just say, I want to be the best version of myself that I can possibly be and do the work. And if you need help, of course, I'm always available, but do the work. And that is how you're going to have a healthy relationship, not just a relationship, but a healthy one.
I like that. Do the work and there's no timetable.
Mhm,
Oftentimes we put timetables on ourselves. So we don't give ourselves enough time to process how we're feeling
mhm,
and to move through the grief or the pain, um, and heal.
mhm.
And that's why you see so many people jumping in relationships
Yep.
after the next, after the next, and after the next.
Mhm,
Um, I had a guest speaker, and she was a relationship therapist. And she
mhm,
did say this. She said, most people are looking for a relationship that suits them right now, that
mhm,
satisfies the moment right now,
mhm,
but they're not looking for the relationship that's going to satisfy them in the future, like the
mhm.
long game. We all want instant gratification, and
Mhm.
that's where we make our mistakes, is through
Abs
that instant gratification.
Absolutely. Definitely.
This has been a very informative interview. I'd like to thank you for joining us and sharing your story. Like I said, I wish this was longer because I have so many more questions that I want to ask you.
Anytime, and it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining the Sisterhood Spotlight. Please follow us on social media at Sisterhood Extravaganza. For any questions or comments, please email us at sisterhoodextravaganza@gmail.com. And of course, please visit our website at sisterhoodextravaganza.org for all up to date happenings with the sisterhood. And if you are looking for that sisterly connection with some amazingly empowering women, we are here for you. And before I close, I want to say this to you: motivate yourself from within, educate your mind, and manifest that destiny you desire. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us.